Every time I see a new emulation handheld that looks cute, which admittedly they are few and far between compared to the dozens of black blocks coming out almost every day, I want it because I look at it and I'm like, hey, that's pretty cute. But then if I do get my hands on it, I'll give my honest thoughts on things like performance and visuals and how closely it can mimic original hardware in a lot of cases. But at the end of the day, once the video's over, I go back to original hardware. And that's really the guts of this channel too, isn't it? We're just improving and reinventing original hardware in ways thought up by the mad lads of the community. I'm your cool Uncle Marissa, and this time it's a little different. I don't remember where exactly I first saw or heard about the GKD Pixel. It might have been on social media or on YouTube, but I remember the general consensus being people really loving the build quality, but having certain gripes with it, like wishing it was cheaper because it does start at around $70, or it did at the time, we'll get to that in a second, or just, wanting it to have a bigger screen or any number of things. It felt very much like a lot of people felt it was kind of half-baked. Of course, I had a somewhat of an interest in it because it's cute, and it also came in like this Evangelion color scheme, which I was not able to get my hands on, but I'm kind of a sucker for it, even though I still haven't watched that anime. Like, anytime, give me a multicolor layout and my heart is yours. But seeing all of that, the fact that I was pretty happy with my Miu Mini Plus and I barely touch it anyway, I didn't really think more of it. I just, every time I saw it pop up, I was like, hey, that thing's really cute. But recently, LitNext, who have collaborated with me before, they sent me over the last emulation handheld that I reviewed, the Embernic RG28XX, and you guys really liked that review for some reason. They hit me up and they were like, hey, do you want to review the GKD Pixel? And I thought that was kind of funny because it's not really new or relevant anymore. But I was like, yeah, of course. I'm actually quite interested in it. And I am quite frankly blown away by and surprised by how this little guy has managed to capture my attention. So I want to sit down with you guys and do a bit of a going through the features and talking about it. But first, I just want to say that if you're looking at this or you've seen it before and you're like, oh man, just looking at that thing makes my hands cramp up, I would suggest that you leave your device that you're using to watch YouTube videos on and instead go fee-fi-fo-fum and check if Jack is planting another beanstalk, because you may be in danger. Otherwise, I just want to say, stick around. If you, like me, are not actually a big fan of emulation handhelds, if you're like, what are you gonna say? You're just gonna go through the different devices and be like, it plays everything up to PS1. Yeah, everything does. But this is something more than that. This is for the people who want a gadget. Okay, this is a gadget. This is not just an emulation handheld. This is a thingamajig. This is a toy. This is a high-tech toy. This is something that actually kept me quite busy for 2 hours on the train. And by the time I was like, oh, I brought my Game Boy Advance too, I should play something on that, we had arrived at our destination. This is a very much for all trades. And I think that this is something that would appeal to people who actually aren't all that interested in emulation handhelds. All right, with that being said, let's go. All right, let's do a size comparison real quick because Americans will really use anything to measure except the metric system. On the far left, we have the Thumbie, which is such a novelty. While it is functional, it's very small, very keychain sized. Then we have the GKD Pixel, absolutely a monster in comparison. The Miu Mini, I think, is a very important comparison to it because it is bigger, and I feel like that gives it an advantage, but also a disadvantage. I have the Miu Mini version 4, which has a screen that really pales in comparison to other small screens. I did a comparison to the Embernic RG28XX, and I preferred the Embernic a lot more in terms of display. And then we have my beautiful Game Boy Pocket Color, which is Game Boy Pocket sized. And yeah, hopefully this gives you an idea of how this would fit in your palm. This is the box it came in. Not much bigger than it. I think it's a cute box. Unboxed. Look at it. It's tiny. It fits in the palm of your hand. We saw the size comparison already. Let's just take a quick look at it. I'm really warming up to aluminum bodies. Like, yes, they're cold, but they do warm up in your hands. I still prefer plastic, but for something like this, it just makes sense. You've got these grips on the back. You have the volume / brightness buttons. The micro SD card goes right here. I really appreciate the little indent too. Very well designed overall. The face buttons are also aluminum. Everything is aluminum. And the screen does indent in, which, while not the current trend of sleek and sexy, I feel like it protects it more, especially if you are going to throw it in your pocket and run off. You've got your triggers and bumpers up here. There is a power button and hotkey here. Now, unfortunately, the only thing that is a bit annoying in the sea of jank is that sometimes the hotkey is this, sometimes it's start and select. You just gotta figure it out, but it does help you. Now, to turn it on, you just hold the power button, and I do love these lights. Look at that. The opening is also so neat. Like, I don't know, I just really like the boot logo. Let's just go to the main menu. It is not midnight right now. I'm not that messed up with my sleep schedule. I just haven't set the time yet because I was busy playing with it. This is definitely laid out in a funny way, quite different than most other handhelds of its sort. So you've got emulators, games, RetroArch. Emulator, games, RetroArch. Shouldn't that be all one thing? We'll find out. Then you have test, beta. What is that? It's so mysterious. Apps, settings. But these two are pretty self-explanatory, I guess, in the sea of things. I want to kind of go backwards with this because for me, what makes this device stand out so much and actually makes it a device that I like is the fact that it has so much random stuff in it. You know, let's go to app, okay? So we have this, first off, FF Play is a media player. I'm not going to go into it because it doesn't have any videos on it right now. It's very much file-based, so, well, let's just go in and show. So for some reason, it's opening a ROM collection, but you just navigate your folders and you can, here we go, video. So you can drop like episodes of something or, I don't know, music videos. What do kids watch these days? Into videos and just watch it there. And that is really cool. You have File Manager, so you can, to an extent, move things around and navigate your files through the File Manager. It's just a file tree that's really blown out. There we go. You have a text editor, and why? Why would you do this? Why would you type on this? This would take you so long. It would take you forever. It would be such a pain. How do I get out of this? Oh God. There we go. Let's just start. And maybe my favorite thing is you have a music player. So you have two, one's in Chinese, one's in English. That is the difference. And this is very neat. So again, you have to navigate files so you can set where you want it to open. It comes with 2 songs preloaded. I'll probably mute this part because I don't want to get copyright struck. And I really like the user interface on this. It's really simple. You just have the song information, the time elapsed. You can also scroll through the songs or the tracks using the trigger buttons. You also have, there we go, you press start, you can pull up the info and an equalizer. I think there's a, there we go. You can have just the equalizer too. And I know this is such a simple equalizer, but I'm kind of a sucker for it. So the music aspect of it is really neat. And just so you know, the audio quality is very good. There's, you know, it's obviously not a like $1,000 DAP. It's not even a $200 DAP, but it's clean. It's clear. I imagine this is like the sound you get from your phone or something. Nothing's weird about it. And it's kind of sucks that I have to say this, but we're over here in 2024 and my Steam Deck OLED is like, yeah, you can't use your IEMs because they're gonna sound like crap. All right, we have input tester. Not gonna go through that because it's just testing your button inputs. And you have a photo viewer too, which very cute. You can put photos of like your girlfriend or your pet or whatever, and your boyfriend, your grandma, and just have them with you. And yeah, it's just, this reminds me less of like an emulation handheld and more of a just really fleshed out iPod, you know, because on your iPod you have calendar, you have notes, you have you had so many productivity tools, and this is a productivity tool. And I'll go into depth a little, very little bit more, but mostly redirect you to resources for MinUI if you want to do custom firmware. But the custom firmware really strips it all of this personality that it has. Russ from Retro Game Core created the MinUI GKD Pixel kind of branch, and he's retained the music function, but I don't know. There's just something so wholesome about this. And let's go into test too. So with test, you've got all these kind of random other emulation type platforms. So you have like Game & Watch, you have Flash, you had Easy RPG, PlayStation memory card. And I confess I haven't gone through all of these. However, this definitely also won me over. I wanted a Flash, and I saw Gold Miner. And I was like, this is Chinese. Could it be? And it was. When I was in high school, I had two friends who had moved from China, and we used to stay back in the computer lab after school, and we'd like watch Korean dramas, and sometimes we'd play Flash games. And she really liked this game, and she really got me into it. So you press the trigger button to get the mouse, and then you can move the mouse, and then you can select. You can press the trigger button again to make it go away. And so this game, you've probably played something similar where you just have to catch the gold, and sometimes you fail and you get laughed at by your friend, and you have to meet at least the amount that it gave you. So it gave me 650. And the reason this is so special is not only do I have fond memories of playing those, but because it's a Chinese game, the URL was like really random and confusing. It was just like a bunch of numbers and letters. And so I was never able to find it myself after, you know, graduating high school, and even at home during high school, I wasn't able to find it. So this is not something that will resonate with everyone, but I think that it's really amazing that I found it here. And, you know, this is a browser Flash game, so obviously it's not like looking excellent. But now let's go into I guess what to most people is going to be the meat of the device. Let's go to games, because that's going to have games, right? Kind of. So these are all standalone games, and you have some familiar things like Cave Story, a little known gem called Chess. You have a couple of Dooms on this. So this was kind of a funny little thing. I have not gone through all of them. I think the reason that the test stuff is in the test stuff is they don't necessarily play perfectly. They might be a little janky. However, with these, they play fine, right? Yeah, run away, knight. Run away. when I was in elementary school, my mom put me in chess club. And I wanted to be in chess club. I thought, you know, it would be nice. But I was the only girl and they were really hardcore about it. So it made me cry. And as you can see by my moves, I left chess club. She was very disappointed. But c'est la vie, as they say in Italy. Okay, so that's games. So that's not exactly what you're looking for, is it? No. So we have RetroArch and we have emulators. So just to spoil it, RetroArch is just all the RetroArch emulators, and Emulators is standalone emulators. So with this, I haven't gotten a chance to really plug this into the computer and clean it out, but you will need to clean this out because it's a mess. It's just wild. It's got a lot going on. For example, when you go to emulators, you've got 2 different standalones for some things, like you've got Oh Boy and you've got Gambate for Game Boy Color, and of course you have RetroArch. So I think seeing what works best with what, I feel like RetroArch maybe is gonna be the standard for everything. But yeah, so I don't know, let's just go through emulators. And one thing that I really appreciate is, especially because the hotkeys are different for things, is when you immediately go over something, it tells you what the hotkeys are. It's not like the cleanest, again, it is janky, but it's there. And then you, again, more reason to clean up. You have so much going on. Why are there 3 folders? Who knows? Classic games. Ah, yes. The classic game, 10-pin bowling, 3D pocket pool. Anyway, you want to see what it looks like, right? I do not, I always pull up Aladdin, and I don't have an affinity for Aladdin. In fact, I hate Aladdin because it's just Orientalist propaganda. However, the game looks good, and it starts with an A, so I don't actually have to go through a lot to find it. So you can see, even with the correct aspect ratio, you are taking up most of the screen and it looks good. And now what's really stellar about this is because it's so small, shaders, I hardly know hers. You don't need them. You don't need to worry about those things so much. I like the color of the screen. It's pretty natural. I don't think it's overly vibrant, and I don't think it's dull. I say that because I do tend to like duller screens for retro gaming, but I can say this isn't dull. And the different kind of options that you have are very limited anyway. So you've got load state, save state, cheat codes, and then when you go to settings, scalars are very limited. Your color filters, you have no filter or default filter. It is extremely limited, and that's good. For this, that's good, because why would you need more? It's tiny. You can't tell what's going on half the time in terms of like those little details. So it's just very simple of like picking what you like, and it's not the extent of like just mania that comes from setting something up on a bigger screen with more options in RetroArch with something like the Miyoo Mini Plus, where if I don't have the right shaders and scalars and everything perfect and filters, I find it ugly. But it doesn't even matter because I ultimately play on original hardware in the end. I think Game Boy Advance looks really good on this. Sonic Advance I played all the time as a kid, and I can tell you that these colors are correct. They're not super saturated, they're not super dull. This is like how I remember it. Of course, it was not backlit. Yep. And even with the the cutoff at the tops and the bottom, like it's centered, it looks great. Hey now, you try playing with the console held far away from your face. My battery pack in my camera did die and I had to replace it, so if the angle of the camera is different, no it's not. So let's jump into RetroArch. That is slightly different than the standalone emulators, of course, because it runs on RetroArch, but also it has a few extra systems. For example, it has Mega Drive, which I don't believe there was a standalone emulator for. It even has Pico 8. All the titles are in Chinese, but you can generally tell what they are by the screenshot. If you're going to use Pico 8, please buy it. It's like not expensive, and you get a ton of games by small creators. So if you get this, don't just go into Pico 8 and like play games without paying for it. Yeah, so let's look at something that is a home console. So let's look at Famicom. Oh, I just pressed A. What is 10-yard fight? I don't know, but high school team. Oh man, sports. I've never done a sport. I don't know, what sport is this? Running, football. Woo! Anyway, it looks good, right? Yeah, everything fits. Oh, they're dancing. Ooh, are we cheerleaders? Ooh, we're dancing. Okay, some games look a little bit better than this because this is teeny tiny little people. But I think that Famicom, Super Famicom, NES SNES do look quite good on this. Look at that. Look at Uncle Fester. All the ladies love him. And sort of similarly, even in this with RetroArch, you've got a pretty kind of condensed version of it. You can go to media setting. It's kind of like all there is. Got original resolution set. So it's very easy with this to like play around and just see what it is that you like, if you even care. Now I feel like, yeah, I can play PlayStation, but why would you? Why would you play PlayStation on this? This is insane. So PlayStation is a standalone one only, I believe. I think I picked a 2D game, didn't I? The things I do for you guys, like I can't see the screen very well. I can see it on my monitor, but with the screen being so tiny, it's really rough to have it so far away. Even the monitor is pretty far. Look at that, it's playing PlayStation. Look at Konami. Look at you, Konami. All right. Okay. So it's not the worst. Like you can read it. But I just don't feel this is the best way to play them. I think I said a similar thing about and this is side scrolling. If you open up something like Resident Evil or Crash Bandicoot, not Crash starring Sandra Bullock, it's even worse. And I don't think that it is the ideal way to play these games. I think the Miu Mini Plus is like the smallest I'd be willing to go with a PlayStation game, and even then that's not how I would want to experience it for the first time. I played quite a few PlayStation games for the first time on my PSP when I was in high school, but that's significantly bigger. And as it was my only option, I was even more forgiving then. Here we have it, the GKD Pixel. Who knew this would be the one that would be the subject of my adoration? And why? Because it, to me, is not really just an emulation handheld. It's the productivity tool. It's a little sidekick. It's the little gadget. But let's talk a bit more about final thoughts, but also just some thoughts on MinUI that I wanted to give. Completely biased, but I understand if you want to see this as a pure emulation handheld, MinUI could be a good option. So yeah, let's over to me. All right, so that is the GKD Pixel. Teeny tiny, we're friends. MinUI, I wanted to talk about that. So as we saw, the operating system is jank, but I like it because there's just a lot going on. It needs some cleanup. This, I think, is going to be, in terms of games, I'm going to clean this up to be like the arcade machine. And otherwise, you know, the fact that you can throw in videos, photos, music, you can play flash games, you can take jank notes. Like, this is just a worse version of the PSP. This is a beefed up version of the iPod video. This is what we had so much of in kind of like the early consumer tech, where they're like, how many features can we half-baked put into one device? And like, yeah, phones do all that, but they don't have like physical buttons that you can push. They don't have charm. This manages to capture all of that, because I feel like, especially with custom firmware, and don't get me wrong, custom firmware is a boon. I mean, I think a big selling point of the Miu Mini and Miu Mini Plus is Onion OS. If it didn't have that, who's to say if it would even be as popular as it is? The thing about custom firmware is it just makes all the devices the same except for the physical appearance. And in my opinion, if this is just given custom firmware and stripped down to just being an emulation handheld, it's not interesting anymore. Like, it's got an interesting build, but it's not interesting as a device anymore. For me, what's interesting about it is there's so much to dive into, so much to mess around with. It's such a good, like, time spender, time waster, little fiddly guy. But custom firmware, but maybe that's what you want. And if that is what you want, Russ from Retro Game Core did make a version of MinUI for it. Now that has some really cool additions, such as if you touch the power switch, it goes into sleep mode. And he has added the music player and made sure that there are some standalone emulators as well, which don't typically come with MinUI, but are needed for this device. And I did try MinUI, and it was like, I can appreciate an extent of minimalism, but it's just a list. It's like going through the Dewey Decimal System records at the library. It's just text, you know? There's no images, there's no jank, there's no intrigue. Like, even with Onion OS or with Nully, which are other custom firmwares I have on other handhelds, they have the personality and character. And it's not to say that MinUI itself is bad. I haven't really been interested in it for any device before, but the complete 180 that it causes this device to do. You lose the video player, you lose like the random stuff like the Game & Watch, the flash games, you lose the text editor, you lose the picture gallery. And yeah, maybe you won't be using those every day, but they're what make it different, you know? And I really appreciate that. But yes, if you are interested in it, it's very cool that exists, and I'll link below to both Russ's video, and Aiden Walls also has a video on that will be more interesting to you to watch. But yeah, that's what I have to say about the GKD Pixel. This is in my pockets. Like, moving forward, this has been in my pocket for a while now. And you know, the build quality means that I'm not worried about it getting damaged. I'm obviously not going to throw it in with my keys. Don't do that with anything. Keep your keys always separate. And it's just a real hoot, you know? The only big criticism I have, there's nowhere for a charm. This is begging for a charm. And don't you dare ever suggest those 3.5mm jack charms. They reek of despair. No, I'm not going to that extent. But yeah, I like this. I'm your cool Uncle Marissa, and I actually like this. Now, if you want to get your hands on that, that is a little bit of a dodgy thing, because it seems that they've stopped making it due to a chip shortage, because this uses a different chip than most of the others. Because if you take a look at a lot of the handhelds, the ones that play up to PS1 usually just have the same chipsets. I'm not like super geeky to know all these things off the top of my head, but yeah, so apparently they're kind of running out of those, so they're stopping making those. So you can only find it in the rare place. And so if you really want one, do check out Litnix. I'll put the link in the description. And also, if you use my coupon code link, you will get a small percentage off of your small device. Future uncle here, and you guys, I took so long to publish this video that it's gone. It's not on the Litnix website anymore. I hope, you know, I don't always watch reviews because I plan to buy something, so maybe you've enjoyed it nonetheless. Maybe it'll come back. Remember when we thought the Miu Mini would never come back, and now it's back in a different form, kind of. The coupon code is also valid on other devices too, if you want to check out their storefront nonetheless. I'm so sorry. It really just has something in it for everyone, I think. And to me, it really has like the vibes of, for example, my iPod Video, which had games on it, or had like Tetris on it and Brick Breaker on it, but you also would play music, and it had a lot of stuff. And maybe it doesn't have to do everything perfectly, but it actually manages to do a lot of things really well. And I would love to see more devices like this, where it's not just the same thing, different coat of paint, and then, you know, half the time it doesn't even matter if the software is that different, because you're just gonna flash custom firmware on it, which you have on the billions of other devices that you have. I don't know, that's my understanding of like handheld collectors, emulation handheld collectors, that you guys just have like everything. Yes, that is all I have to say about the GKD Pixel. I might ramble on a bit more if I allow myself, so I will not do that. Hopefully it is a fresh and interesting perspective, if nothing else. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. As always, a big thank you to my Ko-fi supporters. It means so much to me. Any donation and even any purchase from my Ko-fi shop is a big help. Thank you so much, of course, to Litnix for sending me the GKD Pixel. It's always fantastic to work with them, and thank you for watching. And don't forget to tell them to don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget, you're always welcome at Cool Uncle's house. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.